If you've ever gone hunting for a great heavy guitar tone, you've probably spent at least some time listening to and learning from Metallica's James Hetfield. As a guitar playing studio nerd and Metallica fan, I've spent most of my life studying the sound of Metallica. And now for James Hetfield's tone, I think I've got it narrowed down to the essential ingredients that create the massive wall of genre-defining sound that he's known for. And the best part, you can achieve it whether you want to break the bank or just work with what you've got. So stick around, I'd love to show you what I've learned and hopefully help you get closer to creating your own memorable tones, whether you like the heavy stuff or not. Let's go. What's up everybody, how's it going? I'm Brad Dollar, welcome to the channel, it's great to see you. To really understand James Hetfield's guitar tone, we have to look at it in two parts, the classic and the modern eras. And no matter what era of James Hetfield's tone you're talking about, there are a few essential ingredients that show up time and time again. The classic era is what I would define as 1983 to 2002. Basically Kill 'Em All right up to the recording of Saint Anger. There are definitely a few different chapters in this era, but the overall essence of it is the evolution of their sound from raw to more polished. For James, that means going from that classic Marshall era grit, inspired by all the new wave of British heavy metal bands, to literally defining the sound that we now know as American high gain, which has made amps like the Mesa Rectifier absolute staples. And it's through this era that they pioneered the tone, the production, and the audio engineering that would define what rock and metal are and would become. So that's what we'll talk about today. Stick around for the modern era because that's coming up next. All right, so let's get down to business and talk about where James Hetfield's tone actually comes from. First and foremost, let's get this one out of the way. It's the most obvious one. If you learn anything about James Hetfield, if you do any search on his tone at all, one of the first things that comes up is his picking technique. This guy is notoriously known for being a heavy downpicker, using heavy Tordex style picks, and then downpicking pretty much everything, especially in the classic era. You can choose to buy into the tone is in your hands argument or not, but when it comes to James Hetfield, his downpicking is definitely a signature part of his tone. So much so that if you don't take anything else from this video, just start downpicking more and you'll instantly sound a little more like James Hetfield. Add a little bit of palm muting and you're there. If you want the best example of this, put on pretty much anything from Master of Puppets. It's not like he's immune to alternate picking. He does alternate pick, but the majority of the riffs and the majority of the sound is coming from that frequent, if not all the time, down picking and a generous use of palm muting, using just the bottom of his hand right on top of the bridge. So down picking, heavy guitar picks, and palm muting are essential ingredients to getting more of that James Hetfield style tone. And it's one of the easiest and quickest ones for anybody to deploy. So give it a shot, let me know what you think. No James Hetfield recipe would be complete without talking about pickups. Now, there are so many guitar players in the world that are known for playing both single coils and humbuckers. You know, Eric Clapton's a great example of that. Guy is known for both his Strat and his Les Paul playing. But when it comes to James Hetfield, you pretty much never think about him with single coil pickups. You think about him with a nylon string acoustic guitar way before you ever think about him with like a 3 pickup Jimi Hendrix style Strat. I'm sure he's played one somewhere, especially in the load or reload eras. There's like an overdub of one somewhere. And I know Kirk has played Strats a bunch of times. But for James Hetfield, this guy is all about humbuckers. The cool thing about the classic era is that you get this blend of using both passive classic Gibson 490R, 490T style pickups, but also eventually evolving into pretty much everything being an active EMG style pickup. His early use of his V copy and then his Gibson Explorer really define a big part of the sound that we know him for. And that was before EMG and active pickups were a part of his life. They entered the picture, I think, around Master of Puppets, and they definitely play a big part through the Black Album for sure. But more so than current times, you can attribute his sound to being a blend of using either classic passive pickups or active pickups. Now, don't get me wrong, using active EMG style pickups is the route to go if you want to get a little closer to his tone, a little faster, without as much hurdle. The active pickups, especially EMG pickups, like they definitely have a sound. And then when you distort them or you put them through a heavy amp, like we'll talk about in a second, they really do come to life. The good news is you probably already have at least the passive style in your collection. So if you're going to break the bank a little bit, might be cool to get either another guitar that has EMGs in it, or if you're handy or you have a good tech, you can put EMG pickups in an existing guitar you have. Even though I don't have both, I do think when you have an option like that, to have that creative palette, especially if you're looking for heavy tones, it's worth it to have around. But even if all you have is like, you know, a Les Paul style guitar or like a Strat style with a humbucker in the bridge, you're still in good territory. The most important thing here is to have something with humbuckers in it. Now, I've got a Telly back there that I love with all of my heart and I've used a ton. You can for sure get heavy, great guitar tones out of something like a Tele or a Strat with just single coils. But if we're talking about James Hetfield and we're talking about trying to go after that tone, you gotta have humbuckers. If you wanna hear these two examples back to back, a great way to do this is to put on something from Kill 'Em All and then put on something from like the Black Album. Take Seek and Destroy and then go listen to Sad But True. Even though they are recorded in vastly different ways, that's a really cool way to hear them back to back. My point with all of that is even if you don't go to active EMG land, you can still make it work with whatever humbucker pickups you have. Now, I do just want to mention really quick that I don't really have a section on guitars themselves. Like, yes, if you want James Hetfield's guitar tone, you should probably go get like an Explorer or get a V or get something like that. I mean, if you can afford any of his signature models, like those are awesome options. Or even if you just, go get a current production Gibson Explorer and then drop all of his same spec components in there and then call it a James Hetfield model. I think it's almost secondary for James Hetfield's tone. And that's one of the biggest things that I've discovered. If you're going for that really focused, heavy sound that doesn't just get scooped and lost, I feel like it comes down to all these other components than like the guitar itself. And if the secret was for everyone just to go buy a Gibson Explorer, then yes, I would tell you just to go do that and bada boom, you're ready to go.
Boom! I paid bucks and couldn't get the boom.
But for most of us, we're probably not going to buy Gibson Explorers, and we want to achieve a James Hetfield style tone with the guitars we have, whether we leave them just how we have them right now, or we upgrade them based upon some of his components. There's ways to make the guitar that you have work for this, and focus on some of these other elements of his tone instead. If you want me to do a deep dive into James Hetfield's guitars, just let me know. Drop a comment below, and maybe that'll be one of the next videos in this series. Don't get me wrong, I love this dude's guitars, but I just don't want us to get too wrapped up in that's the central part of his tone when there's so many other bigger components and bigger elements that we can all tap into and borrow from to get closer to creating a little more of that flavor.
What do you think?
Now, no discussion on James Hetfield's tone or anything about Metallica's guitar tone whatsoever is complete without talking about guitar amps. What I love about the classic era, and the thing I think that we all sort of glue onto about that guitar tone, is this very steady progression towards this blend of classic Marshall high gain and that very new Mesa American high gain style amp being blended together back and forth in ever slightly changing ratios. Obviously, the first couple records are all Marshall, and then the end of Ride the Lightning, the beginning of Master of Puppets, the Mesa Mark II C+ heads start to enter their lives, and then eventually just almost all Mesa. And I know Kirk always loves his Marshall, but for James, it really comes down to that Mesa sound. And then as you push forward into the 90s for James Hetfield, his amp becomes even more Mesa focused. I know that he used the tri-axis preamps a lot, and I think the Mesa Simul class powered tube amps. So slowly evolving that Marshall exclusive tone to what we really know as that rectifier sound. Even though James Hetfield isn't super known for specifically using a dual rectifier, the overall essence of his tone has always come from amps from Mesa. To get to that style of James Hetfield style guitar tone is to blend these two styles of amps. Now, if you're fortunate to have both a Marshall and a Mesa, awesome, congrats. I have a Mesa rectifier and I made a video about it if you want to check it out, if you want to get some more details on it and what I think about it and its importance on guitar playing and rock history. But I only have one. However, for me, I'll use that and I'll use the UAD Lion plugin that comes with the UAD Spark plugin subscription, which is really awesome. And they also make the Lion in like a real pedal format, which I know a lot of you guys like. So the center of my tone, whether I'm recording clean or recording dirty, is about having a Mesa and a Marshall. Even for guys like Jerry Finn, that was a significant part of their tone combo. You almost always saw Jerry Finn using a Mesa and a Marshall in tandem. And I think a lot of that origin comes from Metallica. I mean, these tones, Master of Puppets, the Black Album, these have become known as some of the best guitar tones of all time. And at that time, people had a visceral reaction to it. And the same thing happened for Master of Puppets. No one had ever heard anything like that. His amps and his amp combo of the Marshall and the Mesa world, that style, that's a quick route to getting to James Hetfield really quickly. Then you add on great production, great preamps, great mic placement, or at least, thoughtful mic placement, thoughtful preamp choices, and just time spent getting the tone right coming through speakers. You really can't go wrong. You can do that with amp sims on pedals, or you can do it with the real thing. It works really well and it's so satisfying. And I know I keep saying this all the time, like no matter what genre you play, but really like no matter what genre of music you play, give it a shot. It's so harmonically rich, it feels good to play guitar through it, and that's all we're doing this, right? And let's just touch on his clean sound really quick, because he's not known as having the best clean guitar sound ever, but he has one of the most unmistakable and recognizable clean sounds I think we've ever heard. And it pretty much has not changed at all. I always think a great example of this is, well, honestly, anything on Injustice for All sounds awesome. And it's a great use of the Roland JC120 jazz chorus, and honestly also Enter Sandman. This doesn't even gonna make sense when I say this, but it's like a heavy clean sound. It really just punches through. The only route to get there quickly without like fumbling about is just to go straight for some sort of Roland JC120 jazz chorus. Whether that's a copy or a plugin or like whatever you can get your hands on. I mean, that's the most direct route. Everything else, when it comes to James Hetfield clean guitar sound, just doesn't really sound like it. You can record DI and put some chorus on it and it's kind of like it. You can get it sort of with like a Fender Twin, but it ends up sounding like other guitar players. To make it sound like James Hetfield, to make it sound like his guitar tone, you really got to use a Roland JC120 jazz chorus or some varietal, some sort of type like that. So nothing to overthink there. Get some sort of Roland style amp and you'll be most of the way there. So that's how to get that James Hetfield style tone when it comes to amps. Before we get going too far, if you can do me a huge favor and hit the subscribe and the like button, I'd super appreciate that. Seriously, it does a ton to help me make more videos just like this and bring them to people just like you. So thank you so much for doing that. Without further ado, let's get back to the tone. One of the tougher pills to swallow about James Hetfield's guitar tone, especially as a guy who loves reverb and delay, is that all of that classic era of Metallica, it's dry. There's really not a lot of reverb. I think even directives when they're making Master of Puppets, like just no reverb, like it's got to be dry. And for them, it was about bucking the trends of the time, which were about everything being really wet and soaked in effects. It's the 80s, it's the early 90s. Everything is just swimming in some ethereal landscape, kind of like now. So not using effects, not using delay, not using a lot of reverb is a big part of it. So much so where like, you know, if you were plugged into like, what's that Mesa amp? The Mesa rectifier, like the Trimoverb or like a Rectiverb, like a Mesa Rectiverb. You're plugged into one of those, you're literally in a rectifier, and you've got reverb on. It's not gonna sound like James Hetfield. You turn the reverb off, you're like 80% closer to James Hetfield in 2 seconds. I think it makes that big of a deal. Even for like Metallica overall, that overall sound, for Kirk Hammett, he doesn't even really use a lot of delay or a lot of reverb, and they've always added a little bit afterwards when mixing, but really, especially in the classic era, it's not about effects. It's not about effects on the amps or the guitars and things like that. And what's cool is when they do use them, it really stands out. Like on, you know, Load and Reload, when they start to use like envelope filters and things like that. Or I think on James Hetfield's solo on Nothing Else Matters, he uses a little bit of delay on that. It really stands out and it's distinct, but it's impressive to just hear this dry guitar feel so good all the time. Like I have to hide behind a bunch of effects. Maybe I should work on my guitar playing, Brad. But for James Hetfield, for everything just to be so dry and in your face, it's so impactful and it really is so heavy. So that's a big part of this equation. If you want to have James Hetfield style guitar tone, you got to turn off the effects, you got to turn off the reverb, the spring reverb, the room reverb, you know, the reverb inside of your DAW, you got to turn it all off, and maybe, just maybe when you're done putting everything else in place, you can sneak a little back in, but probably not. You gotta play it dry. And that will make it feel and sound a lot more like James Hetfield almost instantly. The cool thing about that is anybody can do that. Anybody can subtract reverb from their sound. And once you do that, it also opens up this sound and this route to like other cool metal of the time, like Anthrax, Slayer, and even like more modern metal. It is a gateway into other guitar tones just by making this quick change, and is maybe not as intuitive for all of us who like to play with effects, but take off the effects, take off the reverb, and you will definitely have a bigger part of James Hetfield's guitar tone at your fingertips. And it doesn't cost anything. Just take it off, remove it. And last but not least, one of the most critical, but also one of the most attainable parts of getting a James Hetfield style guitar tone is layering. The tone that we know him for in his records, in anything of his that's like playing on a loop in the back of your head as we're talking about this, all of that is about layering. Layering in the studio, layering amps, layering parts, and not thinking about guitar one-dimensionally. Now, the idea of like a layered wall of sound is nothing new. The essence of an orchestra is about a layered wall of sound. And even the late and great Brian Wilson was a big dabbler of the wall of sound in productions like Pet Sounds. Grateful Dead obviously built a wall of sound, but even their approach of having, you know, 2 drummers, this idea of like having layers of stuff all at once is a critical part of making music feel full, especially when we're trying to get a lot of energy out of it or we're trying to conduct a lot of energy across a lot of people. Yes, yes, you can create a lot of energy and connection with just a piano and a vocal or just a vocal. When it comes to like heavy music in this genre especially, anything that's rock or metal derivative, it's really about like moving air. And there's not a lot of ways to do that just by dialing in the right tone. You can dial in the perfect tone with 2 killer Neve preamps or like a Neve API preamp blend with the best mics in the world with like real guitar amps, and it's still going to pale to doing the same thing twice. A lot of the heaviness from guitar parts we hear on Metallica records is because James Hetfield is the one doubling all the parts. Most of that stuff is not Kirk. Kirk is playing on the leads and the melodic stuff and the additions, but a lot of the rhythm stuff, especially on all the earlier classic era, that's all James Hetfield just doubling things so verbatim and tight. And that's the best part, is you can do that right now on any recording you're making. If you want more of a James Hetfield style guitar tone, just play your parts twice, play them 3 times, play them 4 times, and focus on keeping them like really tight. There's like the Foo Fighters approach, which I love, and it's a little more loose, and it is about doubling and layering, and things feel a certain way. They get real spread, but this specific way is about layering verbatim, layering the exact same parts to a T, so they sound like you almost just doubled them. That's how tight you want it to get. Versus like a more harmonically dense way where you might play a part low, play a part high, switching back and forth, create some counterpoint. But the James Hetfield style way is really about layering the same thing 2, 3, even sometimes 4 times. I just keep taking the rest of the list. You take this whole list and you layer it twice, pan it left, pan it right, and you are in James Hetfield territory. The parts you're playing are important. Most of the riffs of Metallica are happening on lower strings. You can't really just play like Bob Weir, Grateful Dead style inversions through a Mesa rectifier and expect it to sound like Metallica. You got to play those kinds of parts, so your writing is going to be part of it. But if you borrow that and then apply it to whatever you're doing, you can take that James Hetfield style flair and apply it all the way when you need it, or you can dial it back and be inspired by it. And then you get a cool blend of it. And it doesn't cost anything, just takes a little more time when you're recording, and anybody can do it. All right, real quick, let's just talk about some quick tips on how to create these tones at home. We talked about with the amps that one of the easiest things to do is to get some sort of plugin or amp sim pedal that does a Mesa and a Marshall type sound. Preferably the option that allows you to do both at the same time. Remember, it's that blend that really matters. If you can mic it, 57 right on a speaker is the way to go. Nothing to overthink there. Look for the sweet spot. I love the Joe Bonamassa tip of, without playing anything, and even with your guitar unplugged, turning the amp up all the way and putting the mic at where it sounds loudest, where the white noise coming through the mic and the preamp to your speakers is the loudest.
I listen for the hiss.
Okay.
You listen for the hump of the amp.
It's a great, easy way. You gotta be careful. You don't want to blow out your speaker, your amp, or your ears, but that's a great way to find the sweet spot on your amp or your speaker cap really quickly. In terms of EQ and compression, what I would suggest is to do very little at the amp. Try to get away with leaving everything at middle, leaving everything at whatever like unity or noon is on your amp. For a Marshall or a Mesa, that's right up the middle. You can tweak these a little bit, but the more you can leave them in the middle and just let the amps be the amps, the better. If it's overwhelming or like really gnarly, like definitely, EQ the amp, make it right. Don't just sit there with bad tone to leave the amps untouched. Try to get the volumes right and the volume right on your guitar and the mic placement right before you spend too much time moving EQ and stuff. Again, if it sounds bad, fix it. If it sounds bad in the room, it's going to sound bad in the recording. But if you're looking for a starting place and you have all these components to think about, sometimes it's simple just to start right there. And the best thing about this is you can just take your time and find the best combination of all of it. And then in terms of compression, a little compression is good. I think with electric guitars, you got to be careful because they're already super compressed, but you can always compress them just a little bit for James Hetfield style guitar sound. I do like an 1176 style compressor, but also the SSL bus compressor is really nice. It kind of sounds like the late 80s, kind of sounds like the 90s. But if you want something like a little more aggressive and like in your face, I do think that the 1176 is always a great option for electric guitar. And then you definitely want to layer your part, whatever it is. You want to double it or triple it, and then pan them hard left and hard right. Focus on staying on lower strings. Don't try to do like big crazy inversions or open chords. That stuff sounds beautiful and it's a great way to make your music sound like you. But if you're trying to get that James Hetfield style tone, you want to steer away from that. And that's it. Combine those elements and you are right there in James Hetfield tone land. And from that point, you can pivot off and make the sound your own, or you can lean into it and try to let it inspire Metallica style songs and see what happens. Especially if you don't really play Metallica style riffs, this could be a really cool way to wake something up really new inside of yourself. But let me know what you think. Let me know what you found. Let me know about your secrets to getting a James Hetfield style guitar tone and drop them in the comments below. All right, so let's wrap it up. The part I want to get across to you is to really think about how you're going to engineer your sound. If you don't take away anything else from this video, it's that nothing about James Hetfield's guitar tone is an accident. This is not one of the stories where he plugged it in and it sounded like him and that was it. This is a story of tone developing, of tone hunting. and of a guy who did it right in front of us. Every record that came out from Kill 'Em all the way up to Saint Anger and beyond, which we'll get to. But every record that came out in that time frame is Tony's evolving and changing, and not just like frivolously, but also like through their success, which is kind of scary and bold. Like if you found something that worked, you almost wouldn't want to change it. You almost expect And Justice for All to sound just like Master of Puppets, or the Black Album to sound just like And Justice for All, or Load to sound like the Black Album, but they don't. They all sound different. James Hetfield's guitar tone is really like, it's a story that keeps unfolding in front of us. And I think that's what's really cool and inspiring for us to all learn from, and something we can all take from. We should all keep exploring tones, and we should do it in front of people. We should do it on the records we're making. We shouldn't just hide in our rooms and, not release anything. Make music, put music out, share with people, and don't be afraid of it not being perfect, because you're never going to be fully satisfied, and that's the best part. The fun thing about guitar tone is that it gives you a chance to be somebody else, to try on somebody else's style. Just think about playing Jerry Garcia style riffs through a Hetfield style rig. It's gonna sound kind of wild. It's not really gonna sound like either person. It's not really gonna sound like Jerry or James. And that's just one of my favorite parts about playing music, about playing guitar, and about recording. So I hope this was helpful to you and brought you a little more focus to your tone quest, whatever tone that might be. So thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here. I'd love it if you subscribed and liked so we could hang out together again, so I could bring you more videos just like this. If you made some music and it's got some Hetfield style guitar tones, let me know too. You can drop that in the comment right below. And check out the store I just launched, the memberships that are going on, and don't go anywhere because part 2 of this series is coming right up. Thanks again. I'll see you soon. Bye. Boop 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 boop.